Hey everyone, Ben here. Now, this is a story all about how my race got flipped turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there, and I'll tell you how I wrecked my race at Road Atlanta. I'm really sorry. Okay then, let's rewind a bit. We're on the grid for an F4 race at Road Atlanta in a 1.9k split, and we do not have great pace, qualifying 14th and last of those that set a time. Now, the story of this race is essentially split into 3 parts. Part 1 is all about survival as the lights go green and we get underway. Now, lap 1 was actually fairly well behaved. I used my usual tactic of not getting involved in any side-by-side, and predictably by lap 2 cars started falling off the road. That though caused its own challenges. Just look at this episode from the second lap. We join the live action on the back straight and you can see the track is very congested. There's lots of action and side by side going on up ahead, so I know I have to be a little bit careful approaching the braking zone. And then yes, as expected, we see 2 cars come together, but we also see the car just ahead of us get into a bit of a slide. I have to take avoiding action, then wow, another car straight across my nose and we just take avoiding action. I will never get this lucky again to miss 2 spinning cars. There can only have been millimeters in it. But over the next couple of laps, more cars come to grief, which remarkably means that at the halfway point of this race, I was running in the top 6. Unfortunately, we're now on to part 2 of the race, and that's where everything starts going wrong. We rejoin the live action as I'm coming under pressure from Michael Shin. He's going to be ahead of me into the braking zone, and so in the end there's not much that I can do to defend. At this stage I'm purely thinking about how I might try and keep up with him for another lap and try to benefit from the tow. At a minimum that should help me not slip further back in the field. But then as I'm thinking about that, disaster strikes. I dip a tyre fractionally onto the grass in turn 1 and lose the rear of the car, sliding slowly backwards into the barrier. Now the margins were incredibly fine, but ultimately this was a big unforced error, and one which would ultimately see a chance of a very good result slip away. I'm able to rejoin just behind the Ferrari liveried Enrico Flammeling, so let's hop back on board with the live action. So I'm conscious here that I've got dirty tyres, so I'm being as cautious as I can be into these corners, while also being aware that I've got a driver behind closing in fast. There's still a third of the race left, so all isn't necessarily lost. I could still make up some positions, starting with Flammeling, judging by the closing speeds on display here on the back straight. I managed to get all the way down the inside, and now it's about spotting the apex, holding the inside, and then bang! The biggest crash I've ever had in sim racing. We flipped multiple times before finally landing the right way up and in the barrier. The car is wrecked and we have to pit. So what happened there? Well, looking at the replays, I think it's a racing incident, but one that I could have done more to avoid. Why do I say this? Well, although we were side by side, and despite the fact that you can see Flammeling makes a mistake and has to correct a snap of oversteer in the middle of the corner, which puts him onto a collision course with me, I could have given him much more space. There is a car's width there, just taking into account the curb, but it's very, very tight. Leaving him so little room for error is a misjudgment on my behalf, and I paid a very, very high price for it. So with 5 minutes to go, our race has gone from top 6 to toxic, and remarkably, it would get even worse. Upon emerging out of the pits to run the final laps, albeit adrift in 18th position by this point, I'm caught by 2 backmarkers in sector 1 of the lap. Rather than hold the lead driver of the 2 up, I take to the escape road, rejoining as carefully as I can before receiving a big whack from behind. Clearly the second driver did not anticipate I'd be rejoining, kept it at full power on the usual racing line, and bang, this time our race really is over. I park it up, return to the pits for the final few minutes of the race. Now this final collision, again, I think I made a poor judgment call, probably due to a bit of frustration by how the race had panned out. I think the other driver could have easily avoided an accident, but going off track at this part of the circuit isn't a good idea, so I have to take my portion of the responsibility for that too. And so there it is, a race which looked ominously tough, but then promised much and ended in abject calamity. I was left feeling frustrated and honestly a bit embarrassed to have made a series of careless mistakes. But it's my first objectively bad race of the season, and there's always things to learn, and that's why I bring you not only the good races, but also the bad ones too. We're going to be back for more before the week is out, but in the meantime, if you want to see a race where I perform rather better, check out the one on screen now. It's a belter.